It started like any other night. I was getting ready for bed around 11 p.m. after a long day at work. As I brushed my teeth and washed my face, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept glancing over my shoulder at the mirror, half expecting to see something or someone behind me. But there was never anything there, just my own spooked reflection staring back with tired eyes. I tried to brush it off as lingering workplace stress and exhaustion as I climbed into bed. The digital clock on my nightstand blinked 11:43 p.m. in harsh red numbers. I tossed and turned for what felt like hours, my mind refusing to shut off. Every creak of the house made me jolt awake again. Then, around 12:07 a.m., I heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from the wall shared with the guest bedroom. At first I thought maybe it was a rodent scratching in the walls, though I had never had issues with pests before. The scratching persisted in that same area of the wall for several minutes, settling into an uneven rhythm. It was starting to grate on my nerves and make it impossible to fall asleep. I finally got fed up and flipped on the lamp, squinting against the brightness.
"Hello? Is someone there?"
I called out in frustration. The scratching noise immediately stopped. A tense silence filled the air. I strained my ears, but heard nothing more. Relieved, I flipped off the light and rolled over to get some sleep. But I had only drifted into a light slumber when the incessant scratching began again. This time, though, it seemed to move, first coming from the wall by my headboard and then working its way along the wall towards the doorway. A chill ran down my spine. There was no way those were rodents. Something was scratching its way along the inside of my walls. Maybe it was some kind of animal trapped in there. I pulled the covers up to my chin as my heart rate quickened with fear. The scratching noise reached the doorway, and then there was a heavy thump, like something had fallen or bumped up against the wall. I froze under the blankets, listening intently, but hoping against hope that I had just imagined it all. Then, ever so softly, I heard a light dragging sound, like something was being trailed along the floor, straight towards my bed. My breath caught in my throat as I clutched the blankets with white knuckles. That unmistakable sound of something being dragged grew louder and louder until it was right outside my bedroom door. With a trembling hand, I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand to call the police. That's when I heard a hollow, rattling exhale, like air being slowly pushed through a decaying skull. The scratching started up again, frantic and frenzied, like fingernails digging into the wood right outside my room. I opened my mouth to scream, but I was paralyzed with abject terror. I remained frozen as the sound moved away from my door and receded back down the hallway towards the living room and kitchen. My whole body was trembling uncontrollably now, and I felt sick. What the hell was in my house? After several agonizing minutes, I willed myself to move. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, feet flat on the floor, and took a few deep breaths to calm my racing heart. Mustering what little courage I had left, I crept down the hallway on shaky legs to find the source of the horrific sounds. My phone's feeble flashlight pierced the inky blackness of the kitchen and living room. Everything seemed undisturbed and in its place. I felt a wave of relief wash over me that it was probably just my mind playing tricks after all. Then I noticed that 3 long, ragged gouges torn into the cheap pressboard of my kitchen cabinets. My heart plummeted as I aimed the light closer and saw more deep grooves are clearly scratched into the countertop. Whatever had been roaming my house was strong, aggressive, and had left its mark. That's when I saw it, a dark, vaguely humanoid shape out of the corner of my eye, disappearing down the hallway towards the bedrooms again. I wheeled around, shining the light towards the shape, but it was already gone.
"Who's there?"
I yelled in a shakier voice than I intended. The only response was the familiar scratching sound retreating back the way it came. At that point, I knew I wasn't dealing with a living creature. Something supernatural had invaded my home, and it was toying with me like a cat batting a mouse back and forth. I bolted for the front door, grabbing my car keys and abandoning my phone in the struggle to get out of the house as fast as I could. The engine roared to life and I peeled out of the driveway, not daring to look back. In my rearview mirror, I could see it, that same dark, hulking form standing in my doorway, watching me leave with a 1,000-yard stare. Even from that distance, I could make out its sunken, shadowy pits where eyes should have been over a twisted, unnaturally wide grin that seemed to split its entire face. I don't know what came into my home. I don't know if it was a demonic entity, a restless spirit, or something that forever lies in the space between the living world and the unknowable abyss. But one thing's for certain, I'm never setting foot in that house again. The marks it left, both physical and psychological, are unnatural, unholy. For a few nights, I stayed at a friend's place, but I knew I couldn't avoid my home forever. I tried to push the traumatic events of that night out of my mind, but it was no use. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that twisted, malicious grin and felt those gouges being torn into the walls all over again. With great trepidation, I returned after the third night. The house was undisturbed, but just walking through the doorway filled me with an icy dread. I had half convinced myself that maybe I had imagined the whole thing in some sort of night terror brought on by work stress. But my relief was short-lived when I walked into the kitchen and saw the shredded cabinets and scratched countertops. It had been real. Over the next few days, I tried to go about my usual routine, but I was constantly on edge, startling at every creak and bump. At night, I wedged a chair under the bedroom doorknob and slept with the lights on, a baseball bat gripped tightly in my hands. At first, the nights were blissfully silent, making me wonder if the entity had simply moved on. But then on the fifth night back, the scratching began again. Faint at first, like the sound was coming from outside. But then it grew louder and seemed to be surrounding the house, coming through the walls, ceiling, and floor in that same uneven, maddening rhythm. I leapt out of bed, bat in hand, and spun around in a circle, trying to locate where the ungodly sounds were originating. Every hair on my body was standing on end as the screeching noise swelled in volume, now encompassing the entire house like I was trapped inside the mind of a deranged psychopath.
Get out! Get the hell out of my house!
I screamed into the darkness, swinging the bat violently in every direction. In the deafening silence that followed, I could have sworn I heard it, a deep, gurgling chuckle like grave gases bubbling up from the depths of the underworld. It seemed to be coming from directly underneath me. Paralyzed with fear, I watched in horror as three gnarled, claw-like appendages began ripping and tearing their way through the cheap carpet of my bedroom. They looked like graying, desiccated human hands, but twisted and gnarled into arthritic horrors. I opened my mouth to scream, but only a strangled cry escaped as those hands clawed upwards, pulling an emaciated, hunched figure through the gaping maw it had ripped in my floor. Its body was withered and twisted like a famine victim, the skin clinging tightly to its skeletal frame, but it was the face that sickened me most, those sunken, hollow sockets in the cracked, parchment skin that was distended into a permanent, unhinged grin. As it pulled itself fully upright with a series of loud cracking and popping noises, I saw its mouth unraveled in a way that is only possible for beings without skin or muscle, eating into its cheeks. It was the facsimile of a human smile, but corrupted into something so utterly devoid of warmth, happiness, or life that it became the stuff of nightmares itself. The creature staggered towards me, its rotted feet leaving a trail of withered flesh and scratches in the wood with each agonizing step. I stumbled backwards, gasping for air, still trying in vain to scream. Then its cracked lips parted, and a deep, guttural rasp that sounded like bone shearing against bone escaped in a gurgling chuckle. That was the last thing I heard before everything went black.
Cling tightly to the last vestiges of courage as we bid farewell from the eerie realm of Midnight Whispers Network. Remember, the darkness may fade for now, but its whispers linger on, waiting to be heard once more. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the terrors that lurk in the night. Farewell, brave souls, until we meet again in the shadows.